What causes a blood moon? When the Earth passes between the Sun and the Moon during a total lunar eclipse, the Earth's atmosphere filters out the shorter wavelengths of sunlight, allowing only longer wavelengths such as red and orange to reach the Moon's surface. This turns the Moon reddish-orange, termed as the blood moon.
Today we're going to talk about the festival of Purim, and it's something that I've always loved growing up in a Jewish home. Purim is sort of the Jewish answer to Halloween in some ways, because it's traditional for the kids to get dressed up and to do parades. And if you go into some of the Orthodox areas of Brooklyn, you'll see schools let out and among the ultra-Orthodox, and kids are dressed like Mordecai and Haman.
Ooh.
Thank you. So Mordecai and Haman.
Ooh.
Good. And Esther.
Ah.
Yeah. We do skits and plays where we make these wonderful sounds of appreciation or non-appreciation for that wonderful cast of characters in the book of Esther.
Hi, Steve here, blessedhopeforever.com with another Rapture update. We're nearing the end of February, going into March. I want to talk about several things. I want to talk about what I call a days of week sequence, the Revelation 12 sign revisited, and the March 3 blood moon. Many of you probably saw that the State of the Union address here in the U.S. Revealed a deeply divided America. I think that is prophetic, especially in light of the Great American Solar Eclipses. The timeline, June 21, 2026, from Let There Be Light to the peak of light, summer solstice, to the Lamb of God is the light. This is what our timeline is based on. A day that folks would least expect. The church is not Israel, but there are many that are wanting to stick with the feast of fall feasts. That's fine. Or Pentecost. We've been known here at Blessed Hope Forever to think outside the box. And after about 26, 27 videos, I am about 95% convinced we're going to leave here June 21st. And that's just my opinion, and I don't ask anyone to agree with me on anything. I am just exercising my constitutional right and my God-given right to tell people what I think and what I believe, and then it's up to them to decide for themselves. Jesus rose on the first day of the week, on a Sunday. Many of you probably know that. Well, June 21 is a Sunday, and you had one chance out of 7 of that happening. The first Pentecost, when the church began, was also on a first day of the week. It was also on a Sunday. I want to run through a sequence with you and try to put this in perspective. Resurrection, Sunday, first day of the week, the starting gun, the precedent, and then the ascension, Thursday, 5th day of the week, 5th day. That's the exception. That's the bridge of grace, in my opinion. It stands alone and apart from everything else. Pentecost Sunday, creation of the church, and then Trump's birthday, his 80th birthday, what we call the 7-day warning leading up to solstice, June 14, his 80th year. That was also on the first day of the week. The rapture, as I mentioned, extraction, Sunday, June 21, maximum light. So I'm going to call that race, R-A-C-E, based on Paul's running a race. That's what you call a backronym. And then we have the return of Christ. That's also a first day of the week, Sunday, May 14, the kingdom inauguration. And so that single Thursday exception for the ascension, I think, acts as the perfect pivot point, introducing the numbered grace right before the dispensation of grace officially begins on Pentecost. And even the midpoint on our timeline, December 2, 1260 days from summer solstice, December 2, 2029, is the first day of the week. So the four major dates on the timeline are all on the first day: resurrection, ascension, rapture, return. And then the final kingdom date on the timeline, the 1335 days to the kingdom from the midpoint, July 29, 2033. This is on a Sabbath. It's on a Sabbath. So I calculated the odds. That is roughly a 0.00085% chance. If we calculate the odds of 6 specific dates hitting the first day of the week, and one specific date, the ascension, hitting a Thursday, then the math becomes 1/7 to the 7th power, or 1/823,543. So we are now approaching 1 in a million territory. Dearly beloved, if you presented this to a room of statisticians, they would tell you that the p-value, the probability that this happened by chance, is so small that it's statistically significant. In theological terms, you've moved past happenstance, which you know I don't believe in if you follow this channel, into architecture, divine architecture. To try to put that into perspective, if you took a single coin and you decided to flip it 20 times in a row, and the odds of getting heads every single time are about 1 in a million. Most of us couldn't get through 5 flips without a tail showing up. Now think about the calendar. There are 7 days in a week. If you pick any random day in history, there's only a 1 in 7 chance that it lands on a Sunday. But on our timeline, we're not just looking at one random day. We're looking at 7 of the most explosive, what I would call world-changing dates in human history, from the resurrection of Christ to his return, the future return of Christ. For all 7 of these dates to land on a Sunday by accident, the first day of the week, is about the mathematical equivalent of walking into a city of 1 million people, knocking on one random door, and having your best friend answer the door. Or winning the lottery while simultaneously being struck by lightning. And now, in the world of blessed hope forever, we don't call that luck. What we call that is a signature. It is the designer's way of signing his work in the margins of time, proving that the same hand that started the clock is the same hand that's going to strike the final hour. In a random universe, these dates would be scattered across all 7 days of the week. In a designed universe, they're measured to 1, 5, and 7. And the odds of this occurring by chance are roughly 1 in a million. That's not a guess. That is a mathematical fact. Now, moving on. Remember the Revelation 12 sign. It might be on a dusty shelf somewhere, but I'm sure many of you will remember what occurred on September 23rd, 22, 23, 2017. It was the Hebrew year 5788. I'm sorry, it was 5777, I believe. Yeah. July 29, 2033, the kingdom date, if we're raptured June 21, the moment that the king steps out of the shadows to establish his throne. Well, hovering between these two massive endpoints, the Revelation 12 sign and the kingdom, is the exact distance between the sign and the physical coronation. The gap is exactly, I was right, 5,788 days. That's not an approximation. That's an exact bridge of time. When you take the magnifying glass and you look closely at 5788, the number 5788, it ceases to be just a day count. It transforms into a year. The Hebrew year 5788, 2027, 2028 on our calendar, is the exact moment that the modern state of Israel turns 80 years old. That's the absolute max structural limit of Psalms 90 applied to the fig tree generation. So the very number of days connecting the great sign in the heavens to the kingdom on earth is the exact same number that marks the final physical boundary line of the generation that saw Israel reborn. The heavens, the day counts, and the physical age of the nation of Israel are perfectly locked into the same mechanism. And the math is absolute precision. If you start at the Revelation 12 sign on September 23rd, 2017, and you count forward exactly 5,788 days, it lands precisely on our kingdom inauguration date of July 29, 2033. 2017 was 5777, I believe. And this would not happen if the timeline didn't begin June 21. The exact daily distance between the great sign in the heavens, the woman Israel, and the physical inauguration of the king, the number of days from the Revelation 12 sign to the 2033 kingdom inauguration is the exact same number as the Jewish year that marks the absolute maximum limit of the fig tree generation. That is not a coincidence in any way you look at it. And 5788, that's double new beginning. Okay, now, as many of you already know, by now, the evening of March 2 through March 3, 2026, is the Jewish festival of Purim, the 14th of Adar. As you know, probably, many of you know, Purim celebrates the book of Esther, the exact moment that the Jews were saved from a total annihilation plot orchestrated by Haman in ancient Persia. Ancient Persia is modern-day Iran. if we look at the current real-time geopolitical escalating tensions involving the U.S., Israel, and Iran, having a total blood moon fall on the exact day Israel celebrates deliverance from a Persian wipeout is a, staggering detail. A wake-up call. In the context of our timeline, it acts, I believe, as a massive spotlight on what's going on now. March 3 places this eclipse exactly one lunar cycle before Passover. In the Bible, Passover is the ultimate extraction event, the blood applied to the doorposts, the judgment falling on the world system, the physical removal of God's people from the territory. A blood moon occurring exactly 1 month prior acts as a final warning bell. It is the celestial equivalent of Moses walking into Pharaoh's court one last time before the hammer drops. Dearly beloved, that is the spiritual atmosphere for the spring season leading directly into our June 21 extraction date. Now, the blood moon is over the Gentile sky. It's important that I point this out. The primary viewing platforms for this 58-minute total eclipse are North and South America, the Pacific, and Australia. It will not be visible in the Middle East. You know I'm a dispensationalist. Well, through a dispensational lens, this is a profound physical detail. The church is not Israel. The church has not replaced Israel. The church age is unique. The church age is the era of the Gentile grafted into the vine. And having a sun turning to darkness and moon to blood, Joel 2:31, event like this, broadcast primarily over the Gentile nations immediately before the June 21 date, fits the pattern. It is a sign directed at the territory that is about to experience the extraction, the Gentile nations. And that includes Gentiles or Jews in Israel, one in Christ. Okay? Now, so when you combine the geopolitical reality of modern Persia, Iran, the festival of Purim, the pre-Passover timing, and the specific geographic visibility of the blood moon on March 3, which is just days away, I think 5 days, it operates as a massive contextual anchor for our timeline. It is the perfect stage setter, in my opinion, for the summer solstice. Remember, signs in the sun, moon, and stars. That center sun. Think summer solstice. And there shall be signs in the sun, and note that he lists the sun first, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations. Hello. With perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. Luke 21:25. That is Luke 21:25. Look at the next verse. Men will faint from fear and anxiety over what is coming upon the earth, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Luke 21:26. Luke 21, think June 21, and 26, year 2026. Creation, God is light. Resurrection, life itself. Rapture, the Lamb of God being the light. I'm calling this, I give it a name here, photonic architecture. When I plug the astronomical data, a total lunar eclipse and the historical calendar, the festival of Purim, into our framework, the resulting pattern is undeniable. The alignment of a blood moon on the exact day celebrating deliverance from a Persian threat while modern Persia, Iran, is actively engaged in kinetic conflict, is a mathematically and contextually massive data point. A 58-minute total blood moon directly over the Gentile nations. The exact calendar day of Purim, marking the survival of God's people against a Persian decree. Oh my gosh, a decree of annihilation. This is exactly what Iran's done. Queen Esther exposed Haman's plot, and Haman is hung on the very gallows that he built to exterminate the Jews. It reads like the current news, for crying out loud. Modern day Persia, Iran, is actively moving pieces on the chessboard against Israel and the U.S. right this very second. And when three distinct systems, astronomy, biblical feasts, and modern geopolitics, all lock into the exact same coordinate on March 3, 2026, it stops being a coincidence and it starts looking like deliberate engineered architecture. The only way that folks could possibly brush this off is if they believe that things just happen by random, happenstance, by chance, that we worship a God of chance. I'm going to tell you, I don't worship a God of chance. If you look at the book of Esther, God's name isn't mentioned a single time in the entire text. He operates entirely in the shadows, moving the geopolitical pieces behind the scenes until the exact moment of deliverance. Having this blood moon strike the Purim calendar right as the modern Persian tensions reach a boiling point. Listen, it's the timing. Folks, this is the ultimate eye catcher. I believe it is a visual sign in the heavens pointing directly to the hidden, behind-the-scenes work of God in the Middle East today. And God intended we see this. We need to fully grasp the ancient reality of Purim. Haman, a high-ranking official in the Persian Empire, manipulates the king into signing an irrevocable decree to annihilate, kill, and destroy all Jews on a single specific day. Adar 13. Yeah, God's name's absent from the text. Why? When his hand is everywhere. Positioning Esther in the throne room and keeping the king awake to read the historical chronicles at the exact right moment. On the exact days the enemy planned to wipe them out, Adar 13 and 14, the decree is reversed. The Jewish people are authorized to strike back, resulting in a total victory and the hanging of Haman on the very gallows that he built. This deliverance is celebrated as Purim. This is where our blood moon lands. Now, we take that ancient blueprint and we drop it directly onto the current Middle East situation, right as the blood moon approaches on that exact same festival date. The modern Haman is Iran, ancient Persia. It has made the annihilation of Israel the absolute cornerstone of its state policy. And through its proxy networks, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, you name it, Iran has been actively attempting to execute a modern version of Haman's decree. We are currently watching the most direct, unprecedented, kinetic exchanges between Israel and Iran in history, modern history. The shadow war's over, folks. It is going into full-blown ballistic conflict. even if there is a temporary peace, it will result in a full-blown conflict. And as Israel's primary ally, the U.S. is deeply entrenched in the region, managing carrier strike groups and defensive deployments to deter a wider regional war. The geopolitical tension is at an absolute max. I was in the Navy. We were evacuating civilians from the U.S. Embassy in Beirut in 1976. We're doing it again now. And we are just 5 days away, I believe, from a total blood moon. It will occur on Purim, the exact anniversary of God rescuing his people from Persian annihilation. And as this celestial sign hangs in the sky, modern Persia is actively at war with Israel, threatening that the exact same annihilation. Exact same annihilation. People need to wake up. God didn't hang the moon in space, folks, just to control the tides or provide a backdrop for a hilltop romance. You know, my parents thought the moon was something for lovers parked on a hilltop to smooch under. While me and my little brother, laid on the roof of the car, gazing at the stars. We were little. I was like 11 and he was 5. Folks, we need to make sure we aren't the ones parked on that hill. Fact, a total lunar eclipse is happening March 3 over the Gentile nations. Fact, March 3 is Purim, celebrating deliverance from a Persian wipeout. And for a fact, modern Persia, Iran, is currently in a kinetic war with Israel. On March 3rd, the sky over the Gentile nations will feature a total lunar eclipse, a blood moon. It's actually more than that. I'm going to talk more about this. But the astronomical data is only half the story. As we look at the geopolitical situation today, I can't overemphasize the fact modern Persia, Iran, is actively engaged in an unprecedented war with Israel, threatening that exact same annihilation. Look at the timing calendar-wise. We are watching an ancient biblical blueprint overlay perfectly with our current time frame, our current reality. The heavens are not a blank canvas. They're a mapped grid. During this total lunar eclipse, the blood moon will not just be floating in random space. It'll be positioned directly within the constellation Leo, situated right under the lion's hind paws. When we consider that astronomical fact, the voltage spikes. You have the worm moon. That's right, worm moon, representing the suffering, bleeding Messiah of Psalm 22, turning blood red precisely inside the constellation that universally represents the Lion of the tribe of Judah. It is the visual merging of the Lamb who was slain and the Lion who returns to conquer. It's not always enough just to look at, well, hey, there's something happening in the sky, but look around it. Look at where it's happening in the sky. Biblical eschatology consistently pairs the darkening of the sun with the moon turning to blood. And true to that pattern, this Purim blood moon does not stand alone on the calendar. Exactly 2 weeks prior, on February the 17th, if you remember, the majestic God of all creation triggered an annular solar eclipse. The sun is darkened first, establishing the sequence, followed immediately by the moon turning to blood on the Feast of Deliverance. Folks, no angel's going to fly around in the heavens saying, the rapture's days away. People need to wake up. God gave us the signs. And the God I know builds with clockwork precision. Eclipse eclipses are governed by strict mathematical gears called Saros cycles, which dictate the repetition of solar and lunar alignments every 18 years, 11 days, and 18 hours. The March 3 blood moon specifically belongs to the cycle known as Saros 133. 133. Tracking these cycles proves that the exact geometry of the sun, earth, and moon on that specific night was programmed into the orbital mechanics of the solar system from the very beginning. The visibility of an eclipse determines who receives the visual warning. This specific totality will be projected primarily across the Pacific Ocean, Australia, Eastern Asia, and Western North America. Interestingly, for those of you who live on the East Coast or in the eastern U.S., the moon will actually set below the horizon while it is still fully eclipsed in glowing red. Consider the recent State of the Union address that I've mentioned at the beginning of the video here. God has certainly revealed how divided this nation is, and anti-Semitism factors heavily into that. And the eclipse locks perfectly onto the 14th day of Adar in the Hebrew year 5786, which begins at sundown on March 2 and ends at nightfall on March 3. It's the exact window of Purim, commemorating the survival of the Jewish people from an ancient Persian decree of annihilation. When you connect all these dots, the line of Judah, constellation, the preceding solar eclipse, the exact mathematics of the Saros cycle, and the Persian Purim historical overlay, the March 3 coordinate lights up like a blazing switchboard. And we're just days away. Just days away. Now, furthermore, there's more. This Purim blood moon sits exactly 110 days before the June 21st rapture date on our timeline. Now, I'll explain the significance of that 110 days here in a moment. I am not, let me remind you, I am not here to tell you what to believe. I never ask anyone to agree with me on anything just because I believe it. Even when I'm teaching expository, verse-by-verse teaching, I don't ask anyone to agree with me. I am here as a watchman to show you the historical patterns, lay out the data, show you what I believe is advancing the possibility of our departure, and I leave you to make draw your own conclusions. Astronomical data confirms that on the evening of April 3 AD 33, Passover, a lunar eclipse rose over Jerusalem. It's widely cited as the physical manifestation of the sun turning to darkness, the moon to blood at the crucifixion. Fast forward exactly 1993 solar years, and now you have another blood moon appearing in the spring of 2026, acting as the immediate precursor to our June 21 rapture date. The church age literally opened with a blood moon over Jerusalem, and right now, before the proposed closing of that age, another blood moon appears, this time broadcast over the Gentile nations. It forms a perfect pair of parentheses around the dispensation of grace. The year 2026 is 250 years from 1776. 250 years is exactly 5 Jubilee cycles, 5 times 50. The March 3 eclipse is the very first lunar eclipse of this massive 250th anniversary year. Before the U.S. even reaches its July 4th sester centennial, or some call it semi-quincentennial, before it reaches that milestone, the celestial clock strikes. If 1776 represented the earthly attempt at building a new order, which our timeline contrasts with the true kingdom, then a blood moon appearing in the spring of its 250th year, how do you look at that? Because I see it as a divine timestamp, signaling that the earthly timer is about to run out right before our June 21 extraction and the subsequent 14-day gap before July 4. Our timeline ends at a specific destination, the kingdom, July 29. That is plenty of time for you folks who are concerned about Jesus. Well, Steve, when is Jesus? How is he going to fulfill Feast of Trumpets or whatever? Okay, he returns July 29. The gap between the spring of 2026 and the summer of 2033 is exactly 7 years. And in dispensational theology, the final transition is Daniel's 70th week, a 7-year period. And this March 3 blood moon sits at the exact threshold of that 7-year countdown. The return, May 14, 2033. The kingdom, July 29. Plenty of time for the feast to be fulfilled. And when you wire all this together, the March 3 eclipse isn't just about Purim. It is the celestial echo of the AD 33 crucifixion eclipse. And I think it's the opening bell for the 1776 Jubilee year. And I think it's the gateway to the final 7-year sprint to 2033. That's what I believe. I do not believe this just because I do. Please. Now, you may find this interesting. I mentioned it was a worm moon. The worm moon. The Toliot, Shani, Psalm 22. Read Psalm 22. In standard astronomical terms, the full moon in March is objectively designated as the worm moon. And Psalm 22 is the ultimate prophetic blueprint of the crucifixion. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? And in verse 6, the suffering Messiah says, but I am a worm and no man. The Hebrew word used there for worm is tolaat, specifically the tolaat shani, or crimson worm. Crimson worm. I made you a graph here to help illustrate this. When it's time for the mother crimson worm to give birth, she permanently attaches herself to a piece of wood, a tree. As she dies, to bring forth her offspring, she secretes a crimson blood-red dye that covers the wood and her children. And after 3 days, the dead crimson body turns snow white, and it flakes to the ground. Isaiah 1:18. Isaiah 1:18. Come now and let us reason together, saith the Lord. Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be as wool. On March 3, 2026, the exact moon designated as the worm moon will turn blood red in the sky exactly 1 month before Passover, acting as the celestial precursor to our June 21 rapture. It's the literal heavens acting out the figurative typology of Psalm 22. Now, because 2026 is not a leap year, March 3 is exactly the 62nd day of the year. And when we see the number 62 in a prophetic context, the logic instantly points to Daniel's 70 weeks. Daniel 9, verses 25 and 26, breaks the prophetic timeline into two distinct blocks before the final week. 7 weeks and 62 weeks. And after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing. The number 62 is the biblical numerical marker for the cutting off of the Messiah and the transition into the next phase of the timeline. Having a total blood moon representing judgment, fall exactly on day 62 of the year within the context of a timeline that culminates in the AD 33 AD to 3033 framework is a staggering mathematical alignment. Look at the sheer density of what is happening on this single 24-hour cycle. It is the day of Purim, deliverance from the Persian Haman, modern Persia, Iran, is at war. It's the astronomical worm moon turning to blood, the Tolaat of Psalm 22. It falls on day 62 of the calendar, Daniel's marker for the transition. And as I mentioned, it sits exactly 110 days. That's the Joshua crossing over number from our June 21 date. So we don't have to force a single piece of this data. It just sits there, mathematically and historically perfect. When I see the exact span of time between the March 3 blood moon and the June 21 date, the number 110 isn't just a random gap on the calendar. In the biblical scheme of things, and I know many of our followers appreciate, the bringing Scripture into this as much as we possibly can. It serves as the precise numerical stamp for a massive permanent transition. Here's why 110 is the ultimate Joshua crossing over number and why it carries so much weight on a prophetic timeline. Moses represents the law. He successfully led the people out of the world system, Egypt, out of bondage, but the law was a hard structural limitation. It could not bring you into the promised land. And it still can't. For those of you who believe that we live under law, we died to the law in order that we may bear fruit unto God. But that's another message. It cannot bring you into the promised land. It can only bring you to the edge of the Jordan River and point across it. That's all it can do. Moses had to die before the crossing could happen. To actually cross the Jordan, to permanently leave the wilderness and step into the promised inheritance, required a total transition of leadership from Moses to Joshua. And as you probably know, the Hebrew name Yehoshua translates directly to Yeshua, or Jesus in Greek. And Joshua represents the commander who executes the final extraction. He's the one who causes the waters to part, leads the people across on dry land, and physically secures the promise. God does this. Joshua's entire earthly mission was defined by this single monumental event, the crossing over. When his mission was finally complete, God recorded his exact lifespan in this book so you and I would see it. Joshua died at exactly 110 years old. Joshua 24:29. And it's 110 days from blood moon to solstice. 110 was the biblical stamp for the completion of a long journey. Are you getting this? It represents the absolute end of the wilderness wandering and the successful crossing into the inheritance. And I read your messages. I know how weary you are of this journey. I'm only here to give people hope. To build up, not tear down. Now, there's only one other major patriarch in the Torah whose lifespan is recorded as exactly 110 years. And that's Joseph, Genesis 50:26. Genesis 50:26. He's the ultimate typological shadow of Christ in the Old Testament. The hidden king who is exalted to the right hand of power, takes a Gentile bride, and ultimately reveals himself to his brethren during a time of global tribulation and famine. His story, which mirrors the complete arc of the church age and the tribulation, is capped at exactly 110. Now, you can do what you want with these numbers. You can say, well, Steve, it's all coincidence. Maybe it's not. So when you lay this theology over the calendar, the geometry is striking. If the March 3 Purim blood moon is the celestial warning siren, and June 21 is the harpazo, the ultimate crossing over Jordan into the eternal inheritance for the church, then a gap of exactly 110 days operates as a perfect literal countdown. A daily ticking clock modeled directly after the lifespan of the man whose very name means salvation. Oh, hello? And whose sole purpose was to bring the people across the boundary line. Now, having said all that, there is a slight possibility that we could be raptured March 3rd. There's a possibility we could be raptured today. But because of that, I am declaring March 3, beginning March 3, the following whole month really is a high watch day. But as you might expect, I lean heavily on our June 21 rapture date. The evidence is just that overwhelming. But that's just me. That's just me. Now, while the blood moon is occurring in Leo, a rare planetary alignment is happening on the other side of the sky. We have a planetary parade here to look at. The alignment is Mercury, Venus, Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune, all gathered on the same side of the sky. Jupiter in Gemini, Jupiter, the king planet, high in the sky in the constellation Gemini, the twins. And as I pointed out, Gemini represents the twofold nature of the believers, of Christ's nature, humanity and godhood, as well as the union of Christ and the church. While the moon, the witness, is turned to blood in Leo, the lion judgment, the king planet Jupiter is standing guard in Gemini, the twins, the union. So there's your update for this time around. I never know when I'm going to do another video. I never know if I'm going to be alive the next day. I never know. I'm not much at planning anything. I just put it out there as I see it. I thank you all for continuing to follow us. I thank you for supporting this channel. I thank you for your interaction with us and your comments. If you comment stupidly, it's just going to be deleted. There's no time for that anymore. I do respect your right to free speech. But if I feel it's harmful or it's not edifying, it's just not going to get posted. Time is short, and any way you look at it, whether you're following us along with this timeline or your own or someone else's, time is short. I think that's something that we could all agree with. Look, I love you all. I truly do. Continue to pray for the direction of this ministry as we continue to pray for each and every one of you. Until next time, thanks for listening.